Today, we're comparing the new M2 Pro MacBook Pro to last year's M1 Pro MacBook Pro. In this video, I will share with you the similarities as well as the differences between these two great laptops, as well as taking a look at how they compare in terms of prices to ultimately help you decide which is best for you, whether it be the newest M2 Pro or is it better to save a bit of cash and go for the M1 Pro instead. As always, I will leave all the purchase links down in the description. Just quickly, before we get started, I am doing a giveaway on this brand new iPhone 14 Pro. If you want a chance to win, be sure to check the video description with all the instructions on how to enter. Okay, so in terms of the specs, I'm going to be comparing both the base models of the M2 Pro as well as the M1 Pro. These machines are the stock base models with only one upgrade each, and that is the SSD. So the M2 Pro has a 2TB SSD, where the M1 Pro has a 1TB SSD. Okay, so first, let's talk about the biggest differences between these two machines. And I can essentially break this down into four key differences. There is the performance, the battery life, longevity, and finally a few small refinements. Let's take a look at each of these. Okay, so let's start off by looking at the biggest difference between these two machines, and that is performance. Now, the M2 Pro comes with 2 extra CPU and 2 extra GPU cores, which Apple says should give around a 20% improvement in performance overall. But the question is, how does this translate to real-world use? Well, let's put that to the test. I've run several tests and I'm going to share with you the results of each to give you an idea of how much better the M2 Pro performs compared to the M1 Pro. So first, in Geekbench 5, the single core performance test, the M2 Pro shows a 9% improvement, where in the multi-core test, the M2 Pro shows an 18% improvement. And this makes sense as it has those additional cores. And then in terms of the day-to-day usage test, when it came to running a boot up and login test, I found the M2 Pro to be 22% faster. And then launching all apps at once, which was in my case 73 apps, I found the M2 Pro to be 31% faster. And now let's take a look at a few app-specific tests. First, in Final Cut Pro, probably the app I spend most time in on my Mac, and here rendering a 15-minute 4K project was 25% faster on the M2 Pro, and then exporting that same project was 20% faster on the M2 Pro. Switching over to Lightroom, I did a large export of 100 photos and found the M2 Pro to be around 8% faster. And this brings us to gaming, of course, what Macs are known for. So here I ran Minecraft, and I found to launch the application and open a world, I found the M2 Pro to be around 31% faster. And then in terms of frame rate, when playing with a render distance of 23 chunks, I found the M2 Pro got me an average FPS of around 40 to 60, where the M1 Pro gave around 30 to 55. Okay, so what do these tests and these empty pieces of paper tell us? Well, first of all, Apple's estimate of around a 20% improvement on the M2 Pro does seem to check out. In fact, in my tests, I got closer to around a 25% improvement. Now, I do want to put this performance difference into perspective, as both the M2 Pro as well as the M1 Pro perform very well. In fact, the M1 Pro is still a monumental leap ahead in terms of the performance when compared to its older Intel counterparts. So if you are coming from an Intel Mac, the M1 Pro will probably still be a very big upgrade. That said, the performance difference between the M1 Pro and the M2 Pro, that 25% difference is not insignificant. While I wouldn't consider it to be enough reason on its own to go from the M1 Pro to the M2 Pro, to someone like me who edits videos every day, 25% goes a long way. By the way, guys, if you are enjoying this video so far, a like on this video and a sub to the channel would be fantastic. While we're on the subject of performance, I do want to touch on the SSDs, as there is a pretty important disclaimer that I do want to make. Now first, earlier I did mention that both of my Macs have upgraded storage, so this won't apply to these models, but if we are comparing the base models of each, coming with 512GB SSDs, they are not the same. In fact, the M1 Pro, to create that 512GB of storage, uses two 256GB SSDs, where the M2 Pro Pro uses one 512GB SSD. Now, why does this matter? As ultimately you still have the same amount of storage, this is true. But because the M1 Pro uses two different flash drives, it actually has a much higher read and write speed. Now, is this a deal breaker? I would say no, but it does show, as there will be a difference in the speed of transferring larger files to and from your Mac. All in all, again, this is not a deal breaker, but for me, it is unfortunate to see Apple cut a corner here with the M2 Pro on what is still otherwise a fantastic machine. Now let's talk about the battery life. I want to say that both the M2 Pro as well as the M1 Pro can last me all day, with say around 10 apps open in the background, running of course at maximum brightness, though I will say the M2 Pro slightly beats the M1 Pro with say around 9 to 11 hours of screen on time compared to the 8 to 10. So we see around a 10 to 15% improvement here with the M2 Pro. An area that is always really important to me, regardless of which product I buy, is longevity. These are big investments, regardless of whether you go for the M1 Pro or the M2 Pro, so these products have to last. Now, thankfully, Apple is known for providing many years of software support for all of their products, I would say, whether it be their Apple Watches, iPhones, and also their Macs. That said, I would say the M2 Pro can last most likely around 5 to 7 years when it comes to software support, updates, and new features. And this is really impressive, and only around 1 to 2 years longer than the M1 Pro, as of course this was released earlier, so it won't last as long. I would say probably around 4 to 6 years. Now, these are important numbers to consider when we do the cost comparison later in the video. And then really the fourth biggest difference that we get between these two laptops are a few small refinements that the M2 Pro model adds. First, we get support for Wi-Fi 6E. Now today there won't be many Wi-Fi 6 routers out there, but because these laptops can last so many years, it's good to know that the M2 Pro will be able to support the fastest network speeds in the future. The same thing can be said for the HDMI port. So on the M2 Pro, the HDMI port is actually upgraded from HDMI 2.0 to HDMI 2.1, and this allows it to support 8K displays and 4K displays at up to 240 Hertz. So again, it's a form of future proofing. But just as important as the differences, in fact possibly even more important in this case, are the many similarities that these two laptops have in common. The first big similarity is, of course, the design. Now, both of these from the outside look pretty much identical, and that is because the previous M1 Pro brought a massive redesign to the Mac lineup. This is something that Apple typically does only every 4 to 5 years. So we see the exact same design on the M2 Pro, and we'll likely still see this design for the next 3 or so years, meaning it won't get out of date anytime soon. And this is a really great design. Now, if you've seen my long-term review of the M1 Pro or recent review of the M2 Pro, you will know that one of the reasons I love this design is actually because it's a bit thicker, and this allows for better airflow and cooling while still operating completely silently. In fact, I've never heard the fans on either machine, regardless of what task I'm doing, and this is really great. And at the same time, the computers both manage to stay cool enough to comfortably have on your lap. And this design also allows for more ports, so both the M1 Pro as well as the M2 Pro feature a wide selection of ports, including of course HDMI, though only HDMI 2.1 on the M2 Pro, but both still get full-size HDMI ports. We get the SD card slot and also the headphone port. So all in all, you can see this is a port selection that is really made to or geared towards creative professionals such as myself. Now, another port that I think anyone who buys this laptops will enjoy is MagSafe. Now, if you don't know what MagSafe is Apple's magnetic charging standard, which is great because the cable will automatically unplug if, say, anyone or anything trips over the cable without dragging your computer off the table. Aside from the design, another big similarity that these laptops share is their displays. Now, both have an identical Liquid Retina Pro XDR display. These are really great displays. In fact, I would say the best that I've ever used in any laptop, and that's for several reasons. First is that they have that ProMotion 120 Hz refresh rate, and this makes any motion on screen just appear extra smooth. On top of that, the screens are also super bright, they are very sharp, and also color accurate, which again makes them perfect for that creative workflow. Another thing I really like about these displays is that they have that slightly taller 16:10 aspect ratio, and this is in part thanks to the notch that you'll find on top of both displays and those thin bezels going around. Now, the reason why this taller aspect ratio is so good is because it gives you more vertical screen space to work with, and this is especially great for productivity apps such as your mail, reading articles, or typing up pages in a Word document. And then both share the equally great and reliable keyboard that, for me, gives the perfect level of key travel. I've had no issues with the keyboards. The keys are stable, and overall it has been a joy to use. And the same exact thing can be said for the trackpad. Now, Apple does trackpads like no other, and these laptops share the same Force Touch trackpads, which means you can actually customize the amount of pressure required for a click, and then also the amount of feedback that you get from that. This is a really nice feature, and aside from that, the trackpads are also really big and accurate. Again, perfect for Lightroom or Photoshop or any kind of graphic design work. So those are the biggest differences and similarities between the M2 Pro and the M1 Pro. But now let's take a look at the price comparison. This is of course any crucial part if you're deciding between two products. Now let's take a look at the M2 Pro first. So the M2 Pro can of course be purchased straight from Apple, and the base model will cost you $1,999 or £2,149. Now the M1 Pro is of course no longer sold on Apple's website, so gauging the price can be a little bit more complicated. However, after some research, I found it on third-party sellers such as Amazon for around $1,700 to $1,800, or around 1,700 pounds to 1,800 pounds. And then of course, if you do decide to check on used websites like eBay, you can probably find it for around $1,600 to 1,500 pounds. Okay, so taking everything we looked at today into consideration, the final question to ask is which laptop is best for who? And here's how I see it. I think the M2 Pro provides maximum portability and performance in one laptop. The 25% improvement in performance and around 15% improvement in battery life to someone who edits videos every day like me is really appealing, as it effectively saves me time and lets me get more work done in less time. Additionally, it will also last a little bit longer with around 1 to 2 years of extra software support and updates. And then finally, it's also easier to buy, as you can still buy this straight from Apple, meaning you can also more easily customize things like the storage like I did on my model. However, if you can find the M1 Pro for around that $1,700 price point or less, say around $300 less compared to the M2 Pro, I would say this is a good opportunity to save a bit of cash, as the M1 Pro is still around 90% the computer that the M2 Pro is, sharing the same design as well as the display, and still has really good performance when compared to the rest of the competition, and especially when compared to the Windows side of things. This computer will still last you for a long time. So I hope that helps you out with your buying decision if you are choosing between the M2 Pro and the M1 Pro. But regardless of which you choose, I genuinely think that these are the best laptops that Apple has ever made, and I think you won't go wrong with either decision. Let me know if you have any questions at all, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to see more content like this. Thanks for watching and take care.